Hello, sixth graders. Welcome to week 8, lesson 2. Today we're going to be taking our look at the poem called The Fear Factor, which is the poem that we kind of based this whole unit around. So I'm really excited. This is our last official Fear Factor lesson. Next week you're going to have some a little more chill lessons, but this is the last official Fear Factor lesson. So the things you need to have out, you need to have out the PDF copy of the poem called The Fear Factor. You're definitely going to need some paper and a pencil or something to write with for this. I promise you're going to need it today for sure. And then at the end, you're going to need your Microsoft form. Let's talk about our objectives for today. So the first objective is students will be able to paraphrase poetry and analyze a poem with a theme about fear. And students will be able to compose an original poem using the fear factor as a mentor text. What that means is we're going to read a poem and then we're going to use that poem as an example and get to write a poem of our own. So the biggest word that we need to know in this text is a precipice. And basically it is a really steep rock face or cliff, especially a tall one. So as you can see in this picture, this person is standing on a precipice. So I worried my niece would fall off the precipice if she climbed too high on the jungle gym, is my example sentence. All right, so let's read through the poem, and we're going to read through it a couple of times. The Fear Factor by Sarah Holbrook. I know you, courage. How you ask for what is mine, how you swell in my chest, speak up, straighten my spine, and whisper in my ear. Okay, you say, okay, it's going to be okay. More than the shoe, the step, the doorknob turn, more than the precipice, a fall, a burn. I fear you will abandon me, evaporate, and not return. But every time when faced with choice or change, it is your voice that cuts through the clouds of gray. Okay, you say, okay, it's going to be okay. All right, so in our poem, our person is talking to courage, and courage is talking back to our person. And when something that's not human talks in a poem or a story, we call that personification. Personification. So we have lots of personification in this poem because courage is constantly talking to our person. And so courage in this poem swells up in this person's chest and speaks up and straightens their spine and whispers, okay, you say, okay, it's going to be okay. So courage is telling them, all right, you're going to be okay. Everything's fine. More than the shoe, the step, the doorknob turn, more than a precipice, a fall, a burn. Okay, so they're talking about these are the situations in which courage is talking to them. But then it changes. I fear you will abandon me, evaporate, and not return. So this is our narrator's fear about courage. What if the courage goes away? But every time when faced with a choice or a change, it is your voice that cuts through the clouds of gray. So here they're talking about every time, like anytime I have a difficult situation or a difficult choice to make, it's courage's voice that they hear in their ear and it cuts through the clouds of gray. Okay, you say, okay, it's going to be okay. All right, so I'm going to read it one more time. I know you, courage, how you ask for what is mine, how you swell in my chest, speak up, straighten my spine, and whisper in my ear. Okay, you say, okay, it's going to be okay. More than the shoe, the step, the doorknob turn, more than a precipice, a fall, a burn. I fear you will abandon me, evaporate, and not return. But every time when faced with choice or change, it is your voice that cuts through the clouds of gray. Okay, you say, okay, it's going to be okay. All right, so paraphrase time. So I've paraphrased the first 3 sections, and on the Microsoft form, you're going to have to paraphrase the last 2. So I know you, courage, how you ask for what is mine. So the narrator is speaking to courage. I know you and you are there for me. That's the first paraphrase. How you swell in my chest, speak up, straighten my spine, and whisper in my ear. Okay, you say, okay, it's going to be okay. So courage is reassuring the narrator and tells them it's going to be okay. So I put it in my own words. More than a shoe, the step, the doorknob turn, more than a precipice, a fall, a burn. You help me through all of the difficult times. So your job is to paraphrase these last two sections and put them in your own words. So that's the first two questions on the exit ticket. All right, now it's your turn. Now you are going to write your own poem in the style of the fear factor. You will use personification and speak directly to either fear or courage. What would courage or fear say to you, and what would you say back? I am going to walk you through an example of this. So I wrote one, and I went through all of the pre-writing steps to brainstorm, and then I turned it into a poem. Now, this poem rhymes. Your poem does not have to rhyme. It can, but it doesn't have to. My poem does not rhyme. So you have to use at least two of the following poetic devices: simile, metaphor, personification, symbolism, or imagery. So in my example poem, I use simile, personification, imagery, and I think there's a metaphor in there. So I'm going to give you examples of all of them. So what are you going to speak to? Courage or fear? Courage is what we had in the example poem. Fear is what Ms. Tolson is going to use in her example. So you have an example of both. So in my example poem, I am going to be speaking to fear. So I'm going to talk about what fear says to me and what I say back to fear. So the first question asks you some things that fear or courage might say to me. If you picked fear, all of these questions, you're going to be addressing fear. If you picked courage, all of these things, you're going to be addressing courage. Okay? So remember, I'm writing about fear, so I'm going to circle fear. So things that fear might say to me: you're not good enough. You're never going to succeed. People don't like you. So these are some things that fear has said to me as a person. They might say something different to you. You can use some of my ideas, but you cannot just copy the 3 things that I wrote down. Some things that I might say to fear or courage. And remember, I chose fear, so I'm going to continue with fear. I might say, I'm going to beat you, fear. Like, you cannot control me. I will survive and I will overcome the scary situation. Again, I'm talking about fear because that's the one I picked. So some things that fear might do to me if it were a person: it might bully me, it might call me names, and it might make me feel bad about myself. These are some things that fear can do. If you're choosing courage, obviously courage is going to be a lot more positive than fear. Some things I am afraid of. This is the same for either of the poems that you do. If you're talking about courage or talking to courage, you still need to list the things you're afraid of. If you are talking about fear, you need to list the things that you're afraid of. So the things that I wrote down were death, spiders, and car crashes. Some things that scares me about fear itself. So maybe if you chose courage, you're going to talk about things that scare you about courage. What if those scary things that fear is telling me, what if those are right? Like, what if I give in and start to listen to those lies? Like, I know they're lies, but what if I start to believe them? So those are the 2 things that scare me about fear. And then what is some imagery that I could use to describe the way I feel when I interact with fear? Because remember, I chose fear, so I'm going to stick with that one. So maybe I could, like, something that helps me is if I listen to music and I put on like a really happy song, or like if I'm angry, I put on a really like whatever, a song that like makes me laugh, and that takes me out of that overwhelming space, right? So my imagery could be listening to music with headphones to drown out the sound of fear. Like, I can imagine the sound of the loud music, and I can imagine like the feel of the earbuds in my ear. And then Maybe I put, like, I could have described like putting cotton in my ears or earplugs to make sure that I can't hear the negative things that fear is telling me. So both of those things I can describe in detail as imagery. Remember, imagery is any time that you use sound, touch, taste, smell to describe the feeling of something. Metaphors are similes that I could use to describe fear or courage. Again, I chose fear, so I'm going to continue with fear. Fear is a beating drum, making my heart go faster. So I can imagine my heart racing, like the sound of the drum. Fear is like a shadow always following me. So like I'm reminded of Peter Pan trying to get away from his shadow or get his shadow back, right? You can't escape from your shadow. If you're out in the sun or if there's light, you will always have a shadow, right? So if fear is following me like a shadow, it's always there. It's always giving me those negative statements. And then once you have gone through and listed all of those things in your Microsoft form, you're going to put the ideas together to write your poem. Now you'll notice that I kind of mixed and matched and rearranged the ideas a little bit. That's okay. As long as you have those things of figurative language, you have personification. Remember, personification is when fear or courage is talking, right? So stop following me, fear, whispering lies, saying you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, no one likes you. You are a constant presence, always bullying me, calling me names, making me feel smaller than I am. You are a beating drum making my heart race. So what if there are spiders, car crashes, and death? I wonder if you may be right, or if I will give in to your lies, but no. These cotton balls in my ear drowned out the sound. You follow me around like a shadow, but I am stronger. AirPods blast music that lifts my soul, and I know I will beat you. I will survive. I will overcome. Right? So this is Miss Tolson's example. You can see some of the things that I included in my pre-writing. Here's my personification. Here are the things that scare me. Right? Here's the imagery. Here and here. I'm going to change colors. We'll use green. There's my simile. Here's another, there's a metaphor. And then at the end, these are the things that I'm telling fear, like I am stronger than you. So what you're going to do on the form, you're going to fill it out with your ideas, and then you're going to turn those ideas into a poem. And I walk you through it step by step. The secret word is sunglasses. You're going to be needing these this week and this summer if you go outside, right? Because it's getting pretty sunny. All right, be creative. You've got this. I can't wait to see what beautiful poems you come up with, whether you talk to fear or courage, not both, one or the other, right? As always, I love you. Be good. Have a good day. Bye.